Hello, everyone. I want to share with you that I'm a practitioner. I teach English learners every day in a middle school. And whenever there's an event in the world that happens, I always wonder, well, when am I going to receive students from that place? When will I receive a Syrian refugee or a student from Haiti or a student from Puerto Rico or a student from Japan? So anyway, I want to share with you 3 books that I use with students. I'm a practitioner. And then 1 book that I think can address kind of the theoretical issues and ideas. So the first book I want to share is, you can advance the slide if you want, but it's called Tornado. All of the books I choose to use with students are, can I advance the slide or do you do that? I guess you do that. Okay. Thank you. So Tornado, all of the books I choose to use with students usually are either by award-winning authors or by authors that have, that the books themselves have won awards. So Tornado is, it is Lexile level of 610. It's addressing students aged 5 to 11, but I find I can use it throughout high school as well, because if the students' Lexile levels are at that level, the story is still very engaging. There are 7 chapters. Each chapter has a picture. And so if you would advance to the next slide, please. The spread I decided to show you is from chapter 2. This story is a story within a story. There's a family that has a farm, a corn farm, and one day when they're having breakfast, the roof, anyway, there's a tornado coming, and the children and the farmhand and the mother and the grandmother seek shelter, and the father doesn't make it to the shelter in time, and so he has to shelter in the field somewhere. So then the story within a story, this is a picture of Pete, who's the farmhand, a picture of him when he was a child, when he himself experienced a tornado. So they tell stories during this very tough time of worry. And spoiler alert, the dad ends up being okay at the end, but he has to lie in a ditch and he's all muddy and dirty, and but he's safe. But anyway, in the story, this part of the story, this is talking about how Pete and his family just were having breakfast. The roof of their house blows off. They are fine. They go outside to see what's happened, and there's this trembling doghouse. And in the doghouse, there's a dog, and the dog they named Tornado. And there are some wonderful family-based stories that are told, which for my students, it elicits stories from them. They share stories of similar feelings or having a dog or lots of the different things that happen in the story. I want my students to be able to make connections to their lives, learn the language that they need to talk about those experiences. And I want them to be able to also make connections to the curriculum that we're studying in school. So I find I'm either teaching things that their peers would have learned maybe before my students had arrived to the US, or I'm pre-teaching things that I know that they're going to be learning in the future. So I find using books in this way is really, really helpful. Could you advance to the next slide, please? I make connections to nonfiction texts as well. So in this case, a tornado from National Geographic Museum. And I make things to try and complement what we're doing in class and to build those connections to the classroom, the mainstream classroom. So this, on the right-hand side of the screen, I have what I call like a note catcher, where I have information that the students can use as a reference, not only for when reading our books, but also for when they're in their other classes, science, history, math. I try to make as many connections as I can, or provide opportunities for connections. So in this one, there's the hurricane winds and tsunami, how tsunamis happen. And so if on the next slide, please. This is another book that I use. I have 2 versions of this, well, 2 editions of this book. The older one has illustrations, and the newer one, which is pretty readily available, does not. When a book doesn't have illustrations, I often look for things that can bring a picture or an image to the words that we're learning. I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I want the students to have those words to attach to the picture, and then, as I said, use for themselves in whatever way. So the wave is, again, award-winning author, Lexile level of 790. addressing ages 10 to 13. But as I said, I think it can be used, especially in the support of a classroom, with just about any age from K through 12. If you advance to the next slide, please. So here's an example of some of the text from the older version of the book. The older version of the book does have these lovely Japanese style illustrations. The book takes place in Japan. And just for your information, they have a character at the top of each page. This character actually means death. The story is about a boy, two boys that are friends. One is in a fishing village at the base of a mountain on the beach, and the friend is living in the mountains where they have terraced rice farms. So when the fisherman boy is visiting his friend, a tsunami comes, the whole family is wiped out, the village, everything, and he ends up being adopted by the farming family. There was a big tsunami in Japan. So, I mean, this book can help to bring and other places as well, but this book can help to bring some of the words of loss, of storms, anyway, I think you can see that the books I choose have a lot of opportunities, and I choose to use those books as entry points to other things that are relevant to the students based on the students that I have at that time. The next slide, please. So here's another example of things that I do to try and make bridges between the books that we read and then things that students need to learn in their schools, other school classes. So things like volcanoes and plate tectonics, ocean currents, and I also connect that to trade routes and triangular trade. Why was triangular trade in that way? Well, it was in part due to the trade winds and the ocean currents, etc. And to the right of this screen is an example of a off-the-shelf worksheet that we use in our school. We haven't quite got to this point yet this year, but this is the 8th grade, one of the worksheets packets that they do about land and sea breezes. So I'm pre-teaching, getting ready for them to understand all these other concepts. Finally, the third book I'd like to share, which is on the next slide, is called Smile. And this is a book that is relatively new. It's a graphic novel. I've given an example of a page spread here. The Lexile level is 410. It's for ages 8 to 10 years of age. But the topic in the book that's covered is basically the experiences of a girl from middle school into high school. She does get braces, as it shows on the cover, but there are a lot of other middle school issues that come up, like getting pimples, having trouble with friends, the transition from middle school to high school. But in the book that takes place in California, or set in California, they feature the 1989 earthquake that was in San Francisco and Oakland, the Santa Cruz mountain range. That was the 9.6 Richter scale large earthquake. And if on the next page, you'll see I put another 3 examples. In the bottom illustration on the right-hand side, there's the Interstate 880 bridge that collapsed. So this, even though it's just a couple of pages in this larger book, the book actually has 213 pages and 8 chapters. These images are from chapter 3. These are places where, if you want to go into feelings, they can connect to world events now. They can connect to past experiences of students. For my purposes, I'm thinking, how can I help them to learn, my students to have the language that they need to be able to talk about the things they want to talk about or need to talk about. Finally, I would like to share, this is now bringing the practice to the theory. This is a book, Teaching to Strengths, Supporting Students Living with Trauma, Violence, and Chronic Stress. The book has 7 chapters. The book can help teachers to know better or more things about how to advocate for a strengths-based approach to teaching, how to prepare to work with diverse learners, how to scaffold learning for strengths-based or assets-based classrooms, and how to foster relationships between students and students with their teachers, home, school, home, the school to the community. So if I was thinking if you want another place to go, this might be a resource that you'd find useful. And just FYI, one of the authors asked me about how do I address these issues with my students, and I shared the part about the book Tornado. And anyway, I'm quoted in this book. So thank you for your attention today. I hope that you, as I have, you feel very enriched by this experience, and we're all working on this very important topic together. Thank you very much.